Pigweed here. Today we review a red ale and discuss McCarthyism. Hello and welcome to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crow Hill. Good evening, Crow Hill.
Good evening, Pigweed.
What's on your mind?
Well, weren't we just recently doing something about witches?
Yeah, the Halloween special.
Halloween special and
the
Salem Witch trial?
The Salem Witch trial, yes.
Yeah, and it seems that that whole question of witch trials, people use that phrase all the time.
I know, it's become really kind of a useful metaphor, I think. You know, people know what you mean, and ever since then, you know, what was that, 300 years ago? We're still using it.
Trump uses it all the time about his legal troubles and things. But probably the quintessential thing when people refer to witch trials is Joseph McCarthy.
Yes.
And that ties in a little bit with that play.
And the Crucible.
The Crucible, right, which was written around the time of the McCarthy era to try to illustrate, look, this is just kind of craziness.
Right. It was about the Salem Witch trial, wink, wink.
Yes.
Right? So it's always been associated with the two. Now, I didn't know that much about McCarthyism or the Red Scare, and so we decided, well,
let's look into it.
Let's see how apt this comparison is.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. But first we got to drink a beer. So, this is good old Antietam Brewery, and it's 1605 red. I don't know why it's 1605.
Is that what the Salem Witch trials were?
Local 1605. Is that like, I don't know, maybe it's the fire department or something. Local, oh, it is.
Okay.
The local, okay. Local 1605 asked them to brew a unique beer for their annual Bonanza Extravaganza.
So they're firemen, not communists.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. Firemen, not communists. And red ales are interesting because they tend to be just a touch malty, and they have a slightly red color to them, but they're usually easy drinking kind of beers.
Yes, it's. I don't know. How is it? How is it not a brown? It's probably got a little bit more caramel.
It doesn't have any brown. Doesn't have any brown malt, and I think usually you make it red by adding just the tiniest amount of malt of dark barley.
Yeah, very dark.
Right. Yeah, but just a tiny little bit.
Yeah.
And it's not very hoppy, but very drinkable.
And very nice, very malty.
No. It's not very malty, but it's a touch malty. It's just sort of your regular drinkable ale. Very nice.
Nice little fall ale.
Yeah, very good. So who's this guy Joseph McCarthy, and why do we care about him?
So something I want to pursue here when getting into Joe and the Red Scare and all of that is we hear the Red Scare, we hear terms, we hear paranoia, we hear panic, we hear hysteria, we hear unfounded, we hear conspiracy. And in the time of the Salem Witch trials, well, spoiler alert, there were no actual witches or actual witchcraft.
Right.
So that's what struck me. It said, for the metaphor to really be solid...
Yeah, then there shouldn't be any communists either.
So we discussed during that, like, there's always has to be a little something in the air.
Yeah.
Right? For a scare or panic or whatever to take place.
Yeah, the question is where does the analogy work and where does the analogy not work?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, did Joe McCarthy, who we'll get into, out of thin air, convince the people that, for his own benefit, that these scary communists who don't exist are everywhere?
Right.
Or were there a couple of things that might have been going on at the time? So we're talking about the early 50s, the late 40s and the early 50s. So we're just finishing up, we're still World War II.
Yeah.
And what is happening to Eastern Europe after World War II?
Yeah, so let's back up even a little bit before that. Because,
let's do it.
Because communism was very respected among the intellectuals in both Europe and America for a long time. A lot of people in the 20s and 30s kind of thought communism was a good idea, and they the New York Times would send reporters over there to see what was going on and report back on it as if, wow, it's all very great and they're doing such good things.
These are in the very, very early years. They put together an army. I'm sure if you ask the Russians, their version of who won World War II.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? They're on pretty solid ground when you talk about
exactly.
when you're talking about the amount of manpower losses.
Oh yeah, they lost tons of people.
Yeah,
which is why Russian women are so beautiful.
That makes sense.
Because so many of the men died that the few men who were left to get wives, they only picked the good ones.
Well, they had their pick of them.
Exactly. So that enhanced the gene pool there. But so yeah, the Russians actually they were crucial to the victory over the Nazis. But so you had this environment where communism was popular among the intellectuals.
It hadn't been around long enough to completely fail yet.
Yeah.
So it's all optimism.
Although honestly, they should have known better. But anyway,
Stalin talking about your witch trials.
Yeah, they really should have known better. But so a lot, there are certain things you have to be educated to be stupid enough to believe, and that was believing in communism was one of them. So there was that. Then there was the problem when we were developing the atomic bomb. We had that show about the Manhattan Project, that there were communist spies involved in the Manhattan Project who were taking information about the atom bomb.
Right. So was it an unfounded conspiracy that communists might try to infiltrate the Los Alamos Project?
No.
No, it was very smart, and it happened.
Yes, it was very real. And as you say, Eastern Europe was falling under the spell or under the dominion of communism. Communism was on the march. Mao had recently taken over in China. Communism was a huge threat. And
Korea had just kicked off,
right?
Because they were about to take the entire Korean peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
So
it wasn't like Joseph McCarthy was saying these people were witches.
The Rosenbergs,
right? Yes.
The Alger Hiss trial,
right? Whittaker Chambers and Alger Hiss, and the Vinoma Project.
I don't know that.
Apparently we decoded some Soviet messages and confirmed the existence of Soviet spies in the United States. So it was definitely a real. There was definitely a real problem of communists in the United States.
Yes.
We were
like
involved
the
in
real problem
of witches.
Of witches in Salem,
right?
But
and
yes,
and if you listen to the words of the communists, they were saying, "Look, this is a fight to the death. Communism and capitalism cannot both live on the same planet."
Yeah.
That it's one. We're going to take over. We're going to defeat you, and that was the battle. That was what was going on at that time. So Joseph McCarthy did not invent some boogeyman. There was a boogeyman.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that he was right.
Yes, I kind of thought that was the case and I was very familiar, or not very familiar, but familiar with the term anyway. Mm-hmm. The House Un-American Activities Committee.
Which pre-existed McCarthy.
Right. So I just thought that was all. Oh, and the cat's back.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and it was, and you had a young Mr. Nixon.
That's right.
Was involved in that, but it existed for the purpose of rooting out commies in our midst.
Right, which was a serious problem, and you don't have to say that McCarthy was a good guy to say that no, there was a serious problem with communists in the government, in Hollywood, in education, and various aspects of society, and that needed to be rooted out. It doesn't mean that McCarthy was right in what he did.
You want to talk about the particulars of this man? Because he was
kind of an odd fellow.
He was an odd duck.
Yeah.
But driven and smart and successful. He was already a judge in Wisconsin, and when he signed up for military service in World War II,
yes,
he had a desk job.
Pretended to be some brave fighter pilot.
So he really actually did volunteer for combat mission. Actually flew in who knows how many, maybe it was just one. But then exaggerated, created his persona of
Tail Gunner Joe. Right.
So it's not like it was mostly manufactured.
It was all psychopathic behavior. It was all trying to construct an image so that he could get what he wanted.
Right. Yes, and I'm sure he had political aspirations on his mind. He's like, all right, this is going to be some sweet resume.
Isn't it good
activity.
that none of our politicians do any of this kind of stuff
so
anymore?
Old school, isn't it? You never see that.
We never see anybody pretending and doing stuff like that.
So then he becomes the junior senator of Wisconsin, and you don't get important roles. It's your first term,
right?
As the junior senator.
Senator is a big deal.
It's
anyway,
already
there's
a
only
big deal.
there's only 100 of them.
Yeah.
But so it's a big deal. But you don't get key committee assignments, and you don't get. A lot of people aren't paying attention to you because you haven't established any power yet. You're just one vote.
So apparently, everybody seems to point to this one speech.
Yeah.
On this one event.
West Virginia?
Yeah, Wheeling, West Virginia, who knows, Women's Republican Party or something that's beneath him, so he thinks.
Yeah.
All right. So
he finds something that lights a match.
So apparently he has two speeches on hand, and one is about housing code issues, and his other is...
Yeah, and it's smart if you're talking to the West Virginia Ladies Auxiliary, you might as well try out your speculative speech,
Yeah.
Just see what happens.
Right, because nobody's really paying attention all that much. And then he just waves around a piece of paper that contains his 207 spies in the State Department.
Yeah, it was just totally fabricated on the spot.
But I think what happened was then when he shows up on the front page the next day, the accuracy of who cares about any of that?
Right. He doesn't care about accuracy.
No.
He doesn't care about whether it's true. What he saw was his name and he saw reporters scribbling down everything that he's saying.
Yes.
And
so it wasn't like he was a lifelong commie hunter.
Right.
He struck this chord at this time and went, well,
wow, hey, this is a good one.
Hey,
I'll hang my hat on this.
I'll hang my hat on this.
Yes.
And he just...
It became his rocket ship. It became the way he was going to get power and how he was going to make something of himself. And, there are certain people who know how to read a room.
Yeah.
They can sense... Stand-up comics have to be able to read a room.
Yeah.
And you go into the room and you see what's going on and you sense...
Which material is going to play well here.
Yeah. And he apparently had that gift. And he could read a room and he knew what was going to play well and what was going to get people upset and excited and everything else. And that's what became his ticket to success.
And he just kept riding that horse until people got sick of it, really. But
now, supposedly, J. Edgar Hoover was trying to use him because J. Edgar Hoover was a big anti-communist.
Right.
And he tried to he liked the fact that McCarthy was coming out and doing all this stuff, so he tried to use McCarthy to further his own ideas of trying to get rid of...
Well, I mean, you're the FBI, that better be your job.
Sure.
Right, looking for commies.
Right.
Now, I'm going to call it the HUC, the How Un-American...
Okay, right.
The HUC focused a lot on Hollywood and
there was a problem. There was a problem in Hollywood, and there was a
but
problem
that wasn't really Joe.
No.
Yeah, I always thought that Joe was in charge of this committee, and he was the guy going after Hollywood and all of that, but not really.
No, he was going after people in, allegedly in the State Department and other kinds of places.
And then he went. So I think his mistake was going after the Army. He was certain that. Well, no, he wasn't certain. He didn't care.
He didn't care if it was true or false. He just cared whether making the accusation would give him more power.
And he's very good. I guess you're always pretty much always a lawyer before you're a judge, right? So he must have been but being able to make a person crumble on the stand, and just association of you were friendly with a cousin who who had a socialist book club, right?
Yeah, and there are people who are just fabulously good, off the cuff, like Christopher Hitchens was like that. And often I liked what Christopher Hitchens had to say, but even in times where I didn't like what he had to say, he was just fantastically good at picking apart the person he was arguing with.
Yeah, here's her determined. I said, "Oh, that person just got hitch slapped."
There you go.
Yeah, right. Because
that's what it is.
You tried to go toe to toe
with the master, you know, and
he was, Joe McCarthy was like that.
Yes, he was very good at withering, getting somebody on the stand and asking them questions and just leading them in a way that made them totally bewildered and befuddled, and made them seem guilty.
And one of the things that happened that where this can be associated with the witch trials is you could kind of get out of it by naming names.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened in the witch trials.
Right.
And it happened here too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe, but did you see what Jim was reading during lunch?
Well, isn't that what happens in things that are called witch trials in contemporary society, where they're trying to get the top guy. So what they do is they get all the underlings and they find some minor things about him.
Yeah.
And they say, look,
they're threatening to ruin your brother-in-law's career.
Yeah. If you don't do testimony against
Yeah.
this other guy. So the idea is you find the small fish and you put some pressure on them, and you get them to become witnesses against the guy that you're really going after. And that's a long-standing
right. But but I'm not sure Joe was even going for bigger fish as much. I mean, there was the same tactic, but I think he just wanted
the attention.
I think he just wanted the attention.
Yeah, he wanted the attention and the power. He wanted to be in a situation where he could destroy people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell of a guy.
Yeah, but it's just awful,
Yes. So he would have these closed door meetings, and then or sessions, and then when he figured out who the weakest link was, then he would get that person on the televised version, and people were fascinated with this, and he became a bit of a. Before he became a national jerk, he was a bit of a rock star, and these things were very popular.
Yeah.
And it was like you were saying. I don't think he didn't care what was below the headline after he saw his name and his picture.
As long as his name was in big type on the front page. So
like I was saying, he started going after looking for spies and communists in the army. Well, who was the president at this time? There's a president at this time who knew a thing or two about the army.
It was Truman.
It was Eisenhower.
Was it Eisenhower when this was going on?
Yes. So he's
the
commander of all Allied forces. Yeah. You think that he's not going to bristle a little bit?
Knows a little bit about it. Yeah.
About going after the army. Mm-hmm. So, but there are a lot of things going on. Politically, when the Republican Party had a weak majority, you don't want to be infighting. You don't want to be publicly going after each other. You don't want to be tearing down your own party. So a lot of people who were against Joe were being a little bit tight-lipped, including the president, up to a point.
Mm-hmm. Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment, don't say any evil of a Republican. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not that he didn't have opposition for two reasons: fear.
Yeah.
And party politics. Mm-hmm. If you could have spared Joe and it wouldn't have been with no consequences, they would have thrown Joe under a lot earlier. But apparently, then as these public trials became more and more public, and people got, it's one thing to see Joe on the headlines going after commies. He's our Joe, and then seeing these tactics on television. Mm-hmm. The public started to sour.
Yeah, because once you see, in a way, it's kind of like every time they go after Trump becomes more popular, and part of the reason for that is because now there are legit things to go after Trump. I'm not trying to say that Trump is a shining white knight or anything, but like the way he handled classified material was just disgraceful and wrong. So, and there are other things to legitimately go after Trump. But all this, when they do stuff illegitimately, when they're trying to railroad him with something that's just ridiculous, what happens is the public gets wind of that, and it has the opposite effect.
Yeah, they circle the wagons.
Yeah, and they say, no, you can't. And the same kind of thing.
Even people who don't like Trump don't like the tactics.
Right.
So, I think the the witch hunt metaphor, I think using the term McCarthyite tactics is probably a more useful metaphor when you're talking about, like we're just saying, going for underlings to get to another guy, putting pressure to ruin somebody's wife's career.
Right.
All right, all I need you to do is get
making crazy accusations where just the accusation is enough to ruin somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Right. An association with somebody who has an association.
Right.
And getting you to fold those tactics. I mean, I'm sure Joe didn't invent those tactics,
no,
but but we do know.
But it's almost like there was more of a sense of decorum and decency before McCarthy, and he just came along and said, "Forget all that. I just want to make a name for myself." Yeah. And he would just make these crazy accusations without any evidence. And like, for example, I was reading this one interaction where McCarthy said something, and somebody said, "You have said a falsehood on the Senate floor." Like that was some horrible. Good grief! That's all they say on the Senate floor anymore. I mean, so it seems as if at that time there was a little bit more of a sense of, no, the Senate is a special place. We don't do that kind of thing.
Yeah,
we stick to the truth. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So he did a lot of things. He tore down the decorum of the Senate. He ruined a lot of people with false accusations.
Yeah.
But then he also made looking for commies to seem like a crazy, stupid thing, where looking for commies was actually a smart, important thing.
Yes.
Because there were a lot of commies, and they really should have been hunted out and gotten out of certain positions of power.
Right. And now we look at it and go that, like I said earlier, use terms like hysteria and panic and conspiracy. No. There was perfectly legitimate and good reason, and no wonder people were nervous. Why? Because it was happening.
Yes.
And even if it wasn't, even if there wasn't large scale infiltration in the United States, just looking at events around the world, it's a good reason to be fearful.
And of course they were trying it. How could they not have been?
Yeah.
How could the Soviets and the Chinese, mostly the Soviets, not have been trying to infiltrate the American? And also, you have to remember that there were a lot of intellectuals who actually thought that communism was a good idea, and they promoted this sort of thing. Yeah. So some things you have to be educated to be dumb enough to believe it.
Yeah. Now,
all right. So I mean, McCarthyism has come to mean anything leftists or liberals don't like, anything they consider unfair or unjust. But unfortunately, there was a time back in maybe the 2000s, a little earlier, where there were a bunch of conservatives, like in the National Review sort of camp, who were trying to defend McCarthy. And I read a couple of those articles, where they were basically saying, no, he was right, there were communists. Well, okay, yeah, he was right, there were communists. That doesn't justify his tactics.
Yeah.
And I think it was wrong.
But they're probably pushing back on the idea that of just calling the whole thing a witch hunt.
Exactly, because if you say
witch hunt means nothing was there, you had nothing.
Yes, so there is a pushback against that, because if conservatives come out and say we don't want communists, they say, oh, that's McCarthyism. Well, wait a minute, no. McCarthyism is the bad tactic.
Yes,
McCarthyism is not the fact that they're commies that we should root out of our government.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, did people have their careers ruined unnecessarily for vague associations? Yeah, probably. And was it excessive, and was it unnecessary? What some of these things that these people went through. But let's look at a couple of other possibilities, or a couple of reasons for people having their careers ruined.
Sure. Yeah.
And are you okay with these? So you're definitely not okay with the vague associations with communism.
Right.
How about people who've had their careers ruined for doubting that diversity is our strength?
Right.
How about somebody having their career ruined for refusing to use a preferred pronoun, or saying that a man cannot become a woman?
Or maybe not putting their pronouns on their bio or something like that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then we have taking the side of cops against rioters. that can get you can lose your whole livelihood.
Yeah, going. You know what? I actually think that rioting was, yeah. The coach of the former Redskins said, I actually think that that rioting is worse than people entering the Capitol unlawfully. And boy, he took some heat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or yeah, you could.
Yeah, exactly. Doubting the efficacy. There were a lot of medical people who lost their careers because they didn't take the government's line on the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, if you're the head of your university's, if you're the athletic director, and you say that men shouldn't compete against women, you might lose your job.
That's right. Yeah, and there have been cases, not so much in the United States, but in Canada and England, there have been cases where people have been arrested for teaching traditional tenets of Christianity, where somebody's saying something like, they disagree with homosexuality or something, and then they get arrested and put in jail for saying something like that.
Or reading the Quran, but for the opposite reason.
Yeah, exactly. So, somebody reads
so if you're
the Quran.
So if you're a Christian reading the Quran, I guess if you're a Muslim reading the Quran, it's okay. If you're a Christian reading the Quran.
Yeah, some of these situations are so bizarre. Like somebody's
This
trying.
is England.
You have a preacher, a Christian preacher, who's trying to show like some of the texts in the Quran that should be controversial. So he just plain reads them, and then he gets accused of hate speech.
Right. So if you all believe that there's not that Islam is the religion of peace,
Right.
I refer you to page
Surah 571.
Yeah. And then read it, and then you get arrested by Christian cops who say that's hate speech.
Right. Yeah. Or how about people just quietly praying outside of an abortion clinic?
Yeah. Yes. Because so
they don't believe in prayer, but somehow the fact that you're praying is doing what?
Yes,
because you're thinking the wrong thoughts.
You're thinking the wrong thoughts.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the only thing it can come down to.
Right.
So what were you? All right. I wasn't bothering anybody. I wasn't saying anything to anybody. But what were you thinking while you were standing there?
Yeah. You were praying.
Actually, that's the crime. That was the crime.
There's no
it's
God
a literal thought crime.
Yes, it is a literal thought crime. Yeah, it's amazing. So how about this when adults refuse to accept that their child has changed to the other sex?
Yeah.
Right.
And then you lose visitation rights.
Yes. Yeah. So it seems to me that McCarthyism is around nowadays.
Right. How about this? Was what I was thinking of the names and the. If you think Joe's gone too far, but if you say Joe's gone too far, then you're a commie sympathizer.
Right.
So now he is buffered with this.
Exactly.
So this was people who thought that Me Too was going too far.
Yeah.
But they were afraid to say anything.
Because now they're misogynists.
Yes. Because so you are in favor.
Because you support raping women.
You hate women.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right. You're like, I just think it's going on.
But you're right. It's the exact same tactic, and it happens all the time. Where if you aren't willing to take the extreme absurd position of the left and you say, no, I don't believe, then therefore you think kids should be killed, or therefore you think, you want trans kids to commit suicide, or all these other kinds of absurd accusations that they throw at you. It's like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that a boy can't become a girl.
Yeah. So I just invite the people who look back and say how blacklisting, how terrible it was that a wealthy Hollywood writer was disinvited from working on a script. You're horrified by that 50 years ago, and the 11 examples that we just gave right now, most of them wouldn't have any problem with.
Right. Or how about J.K. Rowling, who gets canceled supposedly. I mean, she can't be canceled because she's a billionaire or something, but because she doesn't agree with the trans agenda. It's just absurd.
It is absurd.
And it's the same people who go around saying McCarthyism, fascism, blah, blah, blah. And they're the McCarthyists and they're the fascists. Using the same kind of tactics.
But let me ask you this. You are familiar with the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
Aren't you allowed to have a dissenting opinion and believe whatever political opinions that you want?
Of course. Yeah.
So, is it illegal to be a communist?
No.
Is it wrong for the government to oust a communist from working in the government?
Well, I would think it would depend. Like, for example, if he was a letter carrier and he was a communist, then no, I don't think they can oust him for that. Right. Because he has a right to his own opinions, and that's fine. But if he's, if he's like in charge of military secrets, right? That's a different story.
Right, but are you now doing loyalty tests?
Yes, exactly. Yes, you are doing a loyalty test.
Yeah,
are
but
you
loyalty
loyal to
test
the United States?
For some reason it's got the same sound as a Red Scare.
Right. Loyalty test is perfectly appropriate. We want you to be loyal to the United States.
I can work in the State Department, be loyal to whoever I want.
No, sorry, you can't do that. So I think, and this is where it gets a little complicated, because yes, people should have the right to hold whatever kind of opinions that they want, but there are different positions where it's more or less relevant.
I'm a little bit worried about that mail carrier that you were talking about. He's got his hands on some documents somewhere. Maybe kick him out.
Yeah. So you can have whatever opinion you want, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can work in sensitive areas in the U.S. government where you might be handing off secrets or how to make a bomb.
You're participating in un-American activities.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's.
And that's it's. I don't think it's against the First Amendment at all to say that we have to. You can have whatever opinion you want. That doesn't mean that you get to have a position of trust with the United States government.
So that's where you're drawing the line.
That's where I'm drawing the line.
Well, what if Joe was drawing that line? Well, then would you?
Well, fine, he can draw that line. The problem with what Joe was doing wasn't that he was drawing that line; was that he was making accusations without any evidence, and not, he didn't have any grounds for what he was saying. He was just making accusations and trying to destroy people.
Yes. So. As we pointed out, I think it's a super useful metaphor. Both McCarthy-like tactics and witch hunts.
Yeah.
This is a witch hunt.
Yeah.
Those aren't empty. I think they're
They're
powerful
both,
and useful.
Yes, but there are some distinctions to be made.
How about Megan Fox?
Megan Fox. Okay, she's the actress.
Yeah.
Right. Likens her career to a witch hunt.
So here she is over here, as lovely as ever. I've been in the public eye for a long time, and my career has been one long witch hunt.
What does that mean? Is she hunting witches?
What did Wally Shawn say? What did he say? I don't think
that word means what you think it means. Right.
And it's like you mean that there's like a nationwide hysteria concerned about whether or not you're engaged to Machine Gun Kelly or not? Is that where the witch hunt part comes from?
I don't know where she's getting the witch hunt thing.
So I guess what we're saying is it's useful, but it's kind of overused.
Yes.
And sometimes I'm not even sure you know what these weird words mean.
Well, I'm not sure Megan Kelly knows. Or Megan Fox. Megan Fox. That's where I was confused.
I see. No,
Megan Kelly
is equally as lovely, but super smart.
Yes, and Megan Fox, I'm not sure is all that smart.
I don't know. Yeah. Her career has been one long witch hunt.
I don't know.
I think that works.
I don't know, unless she's hunting witches and we don't know about it. But, yeah. All right, so there we go. So McCarthyism, witch hunts, all those things are good, but make some distinctions in how you're dealing with those things. All right, very good. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.